You call this a job? You think this toy pays the mortgage? My father, Edward, screamed in our freezing Chicago kitchen. It was Thanksgiving morning. I was running a diagnostic script for Aegis Protocol, deflecting a cyber attack on a hospital in Zurich. I wasn't playing games. But he didn't see that. He saw a daughter not peeling potatoes. He saw disrespect. He grabbed the laptop, my entire empire, and smashed it onto the granite counter. The screen shattered. The fans whined and died. Get out, he roared. Go play your games in the snow. If you're too good to work with your hands, you're too good for this roof. He dragged me to the door and shoved me into the blizzard without a coat. The deadbolt clicked. I stood there, shivering, realizing he didn't just hate my job. He hated me. Before I tell you what that laptop was actually worth and what I did next, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't pound on the door. I didn't beg for a coat. I walked to my car, a 10-year-old sedan parked on the street to maintain the illusion of poverty. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the thermal shock. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The engine groaned before turning over, the heater blasting dust and ice-cold air. I stared at the house. The warm yellow light spilling from the kitchen window looked like a lie. Inside, they were probably laughing about tough love. They thought this was a lesson. They thought I would sit in this car, freeze for an hour, and come crawling back to apologize for my disrespect. They had no idea I was about to initialize a hard reset. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a burner phone. It was a secure line, encrypted, connected directly to the deepest level of my server architecture. I didn't use it for calls. I used it for fail-safes. For 5 years, I had been the invisible IT department for my father's construction business. I managed his invoices, deflected ransomware attacks, and automated his payroll. He thought he was a genius businessman. He didn't know he was running on my algorithms. I opened the terminal app. The command prompt blinked. Waiting. I typed 2 words, Protocol 0. It wasn't a tantrum. It was an audit. My father viewed me as a liability, a drain on his resources. So, I decided to remove the asset he didn't know he had. I hit execute. On the screen, a cascade of red text scrolled by. Firewall disabled. Auto-invoicing terminated. Legacy data protection offline. I watched the progress bar hit 100%. In that moment, Edward Miller's construction firm went from a streamlined operation back to the Stone Age. The next time he tried to open a blueprint or pay a vendor, he would find nothing but digital static. I wasn't destroying his business. I was just taking back my intellectual property. I put the phone away. I didn't feel guilty. I felt efficient. Emotional attachment is just a vulnerability in the system. And I had just patched it. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. The tires crunched on the fresh snow. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was no point in analyzing a corrupted file. The drive into the city usually took 40 minutes. Tonight, it felt like 40 years. Every mile marker was a memory I tried to suppress. The time my mother, Angela, told our neighbors I was unemployed because admitting I ran a tech company embarrassed her. She told them I was taking time to find myself. A polite euphemism for failure. Or the time my sister Sophia, the golden child, laughed at my thrift store hoodie at a family barbecue. You know, if you actually applied yourself, she'd said, sipping wine I had paid for. Maybe you could get an entry-level job at my bank. I could put in a good word for you. I had just smiled and nodded. It was easier to be the failure they expected than the success they couldn't comprehend. Why did I do it? Why did I stay in that drafty house, sleeping on a mattress on the floor? Pretending to be broke? It's a concept called learned helplessness. It's what happens when you train an elephant by tying it to a stake when it's young. It learns it can't break free. When it grows up, it's strong enough to rip the stake out of the ground. But it doesn't try. It remembers the chain, not its own strength. My parents had spent 29 years building that stake. They normalized their cruelty. They made me believe that my genius was a disorder, that my ability to see patterns in code was just being antisocial, that my ambition was arrogance. They whispered it to everyone. I heard them once, late at night, talking to my aunt. It's sad. Really. My mother had said, Christina just can't handle the real world. She's fragile. We just let her stay here so she doesn't hurt herself. Fragile. I was negotiating 7-figure contracts while she said that. I was stopping cyber terrorists while she poured tea. But I stayed because part of me believed them. Part of me thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I am broken. Maybe this success is a fluke, and one day I'll wake up and be the loser they see. Tonight, the cold air had snapped me out of it. The shattered laptop wasn't just a broken tool. It was the stake being ripped out of the ground. I wasn't fragile. I was unbreakable. And I was done pretending otherwise. The Willis Tower loomed ahead, a black monolith against the snowy sky. I pulled into the private underground garage. Bypassing the public spots and parking in the reserved bay marked CEO. I took the private elevator to the top floor. The doors slid open, and the warmth of the penthouse hit me. It smelled of expensive leather and ozone. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. This was Aegis Protocol. This was my kingdom. Kelsey, my COO, was already there. She was pacing in front of the main server wall, a tablet in her hand. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes widening at my appearance. I was still wearing the thin sweater, now damp with melted snow. My hair was a mess. I looked like a refugee. What happened? She asked, rushing over. The Munich node is stable, but we lost contact with your primary terminal. I saw the disconnect log. Are you compromised? No, I said, my voice flat. Hardware failure. Catastrophic. I walked past her to the main desk. A slab of black marble that cost more than my father's truck. I sat down and logged into the backup terminal. Order a replacement for the laptop. I said, custom specs. Expedite it. And, get me a coffee. Black. Kelsey didn't ask questions. She tapped on her tablet. Done. Arrival tomorrow morning. Christina. Are you okay? You look frozen. I'm fine, I said. Better than fine. I'm awake. I pulled up the financial dashboard on the main screen. The numbers scrolled by, comforting in their logic. $34 million in annual recurring revenue. Cash reserves healthy. Pending acquisitions on track. I opened a new window and accessed the payroll system. For years, I had set up a shell company to pay my parents' mortgage and utilities. It looked like a clerical error in their favor, a glitch they happily exploited without questioning. I found the entry, recurring monthly payment, $2,800. Beneficiary, Edward and Angela Miller. I hovered the cursor over the delete button. For a second, I hesitated, not out of guilt, but out of habit. The elephant, remembering the stake. Then I thought about the cold wind. I thought about the laptop smashing against the granite. I clicked. Confirm cancellation. The line disappeared. Next. I pulled up the donation schedule. Every year, I anonymously donated $2.5 million to the localized charity my father chaired. It was the source of his prestige. The reason the community respected him despite his failures. I canceled that too. Cut the feed. I told Kelsey. Sever all external dependencies related to the Miller accounts. They want to be independent? Let them be independent. Kelsey looked at the screen, understanding dawning on her face. She didn't smile, but her posture straightened. Understood, she said. Initiating disconnect. Back in the suburbs. The silence in the bungalow was deafening. The power hadn't come back on. My mother was lighting candles, complaining about the unreliable grid, completely unaware that the reliability had a name, and she had just watched it drive away. My father was pacing, muttering about how he'd fix it himself if he just had the right tools. They weren't worried about me. They were annoyed. Sophia arrived an hour later for Thanksgiving dinner, bringing a store-bought pie and a bottle of cheap wine. She didn't ask where I was. She assumed I was sulking in my room. When my mother told her I'd left, Sophia laughed. Finally, she said, pouring herself a glass of wine in the dark kitchen. God, the toxicity is gone. I feel lighter already. She pulled out her phone and posted a status update. So grateful for peace in the house this Thanksgiving. Sometimes, you have to take out the trash to let the fresh air in. Praying for my sister to find the help she needs. My father read it over her shoulder and nodded. Tell them she's on drugs, he suggested. It's better than them thinking she's just lazy. People have sympathy for addicts. They started crafting the narrative, right there, in the candlelight. They called aunts and uncles. They texted neighbors. Christina ran away. My mother sobbed into the phone, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. We think she's having a breakdown. She was screaming. Destroying property. We're terrified. It was a masterpiece of fiction. They painted themselves as the long-suffering martyrs dealing with a volatile, mentally ill daughter. They genuinely believed I would be back in a week. They thought I had nowhere to go. They thought I had no money. They thought the cold would break me. They didn't know I owned the cold. Weeks passed. The snow turned to gray slush. My parents struggled. The bills started arriving, actual bills with red ink. Not the magically paid ones they were used to. The mortgage was overdue. The heat was still spotty because they couldn't afford the repair technician. But they held on to their pride. They focused everything on Sophia. She was their redemption. She was a junior VP at First City Bank. A title she wore like a crown. She was constantly bragging about her upcoming promotion. About how the bank was expanding. About how she was going to run the branch one day. I'm on the fast track. She told them over a dinner of canned soup. The regional manager loves me. He said, I'm a rising star. My father beamed. See? He said, glaring at my empty chair. That's what a real career looks like. That's what loyalty gets you. Then, the invitation arrived. It came in the mail. Heavy cardstock with gold embossing. The Chicago Business Innovators Gala. It was the event of the season. A black tie affair where the city's elite patted themselves on the back. My father read the card, his hands shaking with excitement. He saw that Sophia was listed as a recipient of a Rising Star Award. It was a minor accolade. Something given to 50 people just to sell tickets. But to my father, it was the Nobel Prize. It was his proof. Proof that he had raised a winner. Proof that he was a success. He spent his last remaining savings money that should have gone to the mortgage to buy a table. Front and center. He was bringing everyone. My mother. Sophia. Aunts. Uncles. They were going to parade their victory in front of the city. They didn't know the venue. They didn't know the keynote speaker. And they certainly didn't know that earlier that morning. In my penthouse office, I had signed a thick stack of documents acquiring First City Bank. I hadn't just cut them off. I had bought the institution Sophia relied on for her identity. They were walking into a lion's den. Convinced they were the lions. The ballroom was glittering. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears. The centerpieces were forests of white orchids that probably cost more than my parents' car. My family sat at table 1, preening, My father was in a rented tuxedo that was too tight across the shoulders, straining against his bulk. My mother wore a dress she couldn't afford, looking around with a desperate, hungry smile. Sophia was glowing, clutching her participation trophy like it was gold bullion. They were loud. I could hear them from backstage. My father was holding court, telling a captive audience at the next table about his daughters. One is a VP, he boasted, pointing at Sophia with a half-empty glass of champagne. The other, well, we don't talk about her. Lost cause. Sad story. Really? Drugs? We think. He shook his head mournfully, playing the tragic patriarch to perfection. The lights dimmed. The room went silent. A spotlight hit the stage. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host for the evening, the founder and CEO of Aegis Protocol, the woman who secures the world, the mystery keynote speaker, Christina Miller. I walked out. I wasn't wearing a hoodie. I was wearing a tailored white suit that gleamed under the stage lights. My hair was sleek, my makeup sharp. I stood in the spotlight and waited. The silence from table 1 was absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. I saw my father's face. The blood drained from it so fast he looked gray. My mother dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. A single sharp note in the dead air. Sophia froze, her mouth slightly open, the realization crashing down on her like a wave. I didn't look at them. Not yet. I looked at the crowd. Welcome, I said. My voice was steady, amplified, commanding. Tonight we talk about value. We talk about what is real and what is an illusion. Behind me, the massive 50-foot screen flickered to life. The Aegis Protocol logo appeared, sleek and silver. Then, the numbers. $34 million ARR. 300 employees. Global reach, Tokyo, London, Zurich, New York. The crowd gasped. This wasn't just a company, it was a titan. I walked them through the growth. I showed them the graph. A line shooting upward like a rocket. This is what you can build, I said. When you stop listening to the people who tell you to be small, this is what happens when you turn off the noise and do the work. Then I paused. I looked down at table 1. I locked eyes with my father. But success has a cost, I said softly. Sometimes. The people who are supposed to believe in you are the ones who try to break you. I clicked the remote. The screen changed. The charts vanished. The kitchen video began to play. It was magnified. 10 feet tall. Edward's face, red and contorted, filled the room. The sound of the laptop smashing against the counter echoed through the ballroom speakers. A sickening crunch that made people flinch. Then the audio. Get out! Go play your games in the snow! The crowd watched in horrified silence as he dragged me to the door and threw me out. The video ended on a freeze frame of the closed door. The deadbolt locking. I let it sit there for a long moment. Then I spoke into the microphone. To the man at table 1 who said this machine was a toy, it just bought your bank. I pointed at him. The spotlight swung, hitting my father. He shrank back, shielding his eyes, looking like a cockroach caught in the light. This was cognitive dissonance in real time. He couldn't process it. His brain was trying to reconcile the worthless burden he threw out with the titan standing on stage. His ego was fracturing. It wasn't pride on his face. It was a narcissistic injury so deep he looked like he might stroke out. He realized he hadn't just kicked out a daughter, he had kicked out the lottery. I looked at Sophia. And to the former junior VP of First City Bank, I said, I hope you enjoyed your time there. My acquisition team tells me the restructuring is complete. Effective, immediately. She burst into tears. It was ugly. Raw sobbing. She buried her face in her hands. My mother just stared at me. a look of utter devastation on her face. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the image she had spent 30 years building. Now shattered on the floor like cheap glass. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just looked at them with cold, clinical detachment. "This is the truth," I said. "And the truth doesn't care about your pride." Security escorted them out before I even left the stage. Kelsey handled it. She was polite but firm. "Mr. Miller, you need to leave. Now." My father tried to argue, tried to bluster, but without his narrative. He had no power. He was just a guy in a rented tux shouting at a security guard. I finished my speech to a standing ovation. Afterward, people lined up to shake my hand. Investors, CEOs, politicians. They didn't ask about my family. They asked about my vision. They asked about the future. I walked out to the parking lot an hour later. Exhausted but wired. My car was waiting. But so was he. Edward was standing by the exit, shivering in the cool night air. He looked deflated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, clawing need. "Christina," he called out as I approached. "Wait." I stopped. I didn't move closer. I just waited. "You can't do this," he said, his voice shaking. "You can't just humiliate us like that. We're your family. We raised you. I owe you," he said. "I owe you a cut. You built that company under my roof. That's my electricity. My food. You owe me." I stared at him. Even now. Even in the ruins. He was trying to negotiate. He still thought this was a transaction. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single white envelope. "I didn't owe you a cut," I said. "But I did get you something." I handed it to him. He tore it open, his hands trembling. He pulled out the document. It was a foreclosure notice. But not from the bank. From Aegis Holdings. "I bought your mortgage note, Dad," I said. "You haven't paid in 3 months. You're in default. This is your 30-day notice. Eviction. You wanted me on the streets," I said, opening my car door. I just returned the favor. He stood there, holding the paper, staring at me with a look of pure terror. "Christina, please. Where will we go?" "I don't know," I said, getting into the driver's seat. "I hear it's cold out there. Toughen up." I slammed the door and drove away. The city lights blurred past as I drove. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the engine and the beat of my own heart. I drove past the exit for the suburbs, past the turnoff for the life I used to have. I kept going. Toward the lake. Toward the penthouse. Toward the future. I didn't feel guilty. That was the surprise. I thought I would feel a pang. A regret. But I felt nothing but lightness. The chain was gone. The stake was gone. I looked at the passenger seat. Empty. No approval. No validation. Just space. Space for me to fill with whatever I wanted. I thought about the people watching this story. The ones who feel like outsiders in their own homes. The ones who are told they are too much. Or not enough. Or just wrong. I wanted to tell them something. I wanted to break the fourth wall and look them in the eye. If you are the black sheep, stop trying to bleach your wool. You weren't made to fit into their flock. You were made to build your own pasture. Stop waiting for them to wake up. They are sleeping on purpose. Leave the house. Build the thing. Buy the bank. Family isn't about whose blood you share. It's about who bleeds for you. My family was back at the gala, cleaning up the confetti. My family was Kelsey, protecting my flank. My family was the code I wrote. My family was me. I pulled into the garage, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment in the silence. It was a good silence. A clean silence. Then I got out, walked to the elevator. and press the button for the top floor. Going up.